I worked in property management for 6 years before I transferred to Kellner and Associates. That's not a long time, but it's long enough to understand that the job is mostly thankless administrative work punctuated by small human crises. Leaking pipes, noise complaints, rent disputes, the occasional lockout. You become a kind of invisible custodian of other people's domestic lives. You see their mess, their mail, their arguments through thin walls. You process their move-in packets and their move-out forms, and in between, you try not to think too much about any of it. I took the position at Kellner because it paid 11% more than my previous firm and because the portfolio was smaller. 14 buildings, all within a 6-block radius in the Harwick neighborhood. Older construction, 1940s, 1950s, mostly brick mid-rises with steam heat and original hardwood. The kind of buildings that have character, which is another way of saying they have problems nobody wants to pay to fix properly. But manageable problems. Familiar ones. My supervisor was a woman named Denise Okafor. She'd been with Kellner for almost 15 years and had the particular exhaustion of someone who had long ago stopped being surprised by anything the job could produce. She trained me for 2 weeks. The training was mostly procedural: how to file maintenance requests, how to log inspections, how to handle lease violations, how to conduct exit interviews. The exit interviews were something I hadn't encountered before. At my previous firm, tenants moved out, and that was it. You did a walkthrough, documented the unit condition, returned the deposit or didn't, and moved on. But Kellner had a policy, apparently instituted by the original partners in the early 90s, that required a brief exit interview with every departing tenant. 5 to 10 minutes, conducted by the property manager, documented on a standard form. The stated purpose was quality assurance, feedback on maintenance responsiveness, building condition, neighbor relations, that sort of thing. Most tenants treated it as a formality. Some used it to air grievances about things we could no longer fix for them. A few declined to participate at all, which was their right. Denise told me the interviews were usually nothing. "You'll learn more from the walkthroughs," she said. "But do the forms. Corporate checks." I started in March. By mid-April, I had the routines down. I managed 7 of the 14 buildings directly. Denise handled the other 7. My buildings were all on Garber Street and Elm. 4 on Garber, 3 on Elm. Unit sizes ranged from studios to 2 bedrooms. Tenant turnover was moderate. Nothing unusual. Building 4120 Garber was the oldest in my portfolio. 6 floors, 4 units per floor, no elevator. The lobby had green tile that was probably original, and the stairwell smelled permanently of radiator steam and old carpet. It wasn't unpleasant exactly, just dense. Like the air had weight to it. The super for 4120 was a man named Gerald who'd been there since 2011. He was quiet, efficient, and preferred to communicate by text rather than conversation. I appreciated that. My first exit interview at 4120 was in May. A woman named Patricia Sims, Unit 2B, moving out after 3 years. Routine departure. She'd gotten a new job across the city and wanted a shorter commute. The interview was unremarkable. She rated maintenance response a 7 out of 10. Said the hallway lighting on the second floor was inconsistent. Said she'd miss the neighborhood. I thanked her, filed the form, processed her deposit return. I didn't think about 4120 again with any particular attention until August. In August, I received a move-out notice from the tenant in 4C. His name was Marcus Uribe. He'd been there for 14 months. I scheduled the walkthrough and the exit interview for August 22nd. The walkthrough was fine. The unit was clean. Cleaner than average, actually. Marcus had clearly scrubbed the place before leaving. The floors were bare. The walls had been wiped down. The fixtures were in good condition. I noted a small crack in the bathroom tile, pre-existing per the move-in report. I took my photos, filled out the condition form. Everything normal. Then I sat down with Marcus in the lobby for the exit interview. He was a thin man, mid-30s, with neat clothes and a calm demeanor. He answered the standard questions without complaint. Maintenance. 8 out of 10. Building condition. 7. Neighbor relations. Fine, no issues. Reason for moving. He paused at that one. Personal, he said. I marked it down. People say that. It can mean anything. Breakup, family issue, financial pressure, job change. I don't press. That's not what the form is for. Then he said, Can I mention something that isn't on the form? I told him, of course. He looked at the floor for a moment. Then he said, I started having a dream in that apartment. The same dream over and over, almost every night for the last 2 months. I've never had a recurring dream before in my life. Not once. And it stopped the first night I slept somewhere else. I didn't know what to say to that. I think I said something like, That must have been stressful. He nodded. It wasn't a nightmare exactly. It was just, I was in the apartment, but it was wrong. The layout was wrong. There was an extra hallway. And at the end of the hallway, there was a door that didn't go anywhere. And I knew I wasn't supposed to open it, but every time I walked toward it. Every time. And I could hear water behind it. Not rushing water. Still water. Like a pool with no circulation. And I would put my hand on the knob, and that's when I'd wake up. He told me this very evenly. No drama. No wide eyes. He might as well have been telling me about a parking ticket. I just thought someone should know, he said, in case anyone else mentions it. I thanked him. I wrote, Tenant reported recurring dream possibly related to sleep quality / building noise in the additional comments section. I filed the form. I moved on. I want to be clear about something. I am not a superstitious person. I don't believe in haunted buildings or cursed apartments. I've managed units where people died, natural causes, one suicide, and I process those turnovers the same as any other. Death is a paperwork event in this job. That sounds callous, but it's true. So when Marcus Uribe told me about his dream, I categorized it the way I categorized all unusual tenant comments, as a data point with no obvious action item. I forgot about it almost immediately. Then in November, Unit 4C turned over again. The new tenant, a woman named Joy Kessler, had moved in September 1st and gave notice October 15th. 6 weeks. That's short, even for a month-to-month lease. The early termination fee applied, and she paid it without argument, which was unusual. Most people pushed back on that. I did the walkthrough on November 3rd. The unit was in acceptable condition. Not as clean as Marcus had left it, but no damage. Scuff marks on the kitchen floor. A slight discoloration on the bedroom ceiling that I noted for maintenance. Normal wear. The exit interview was on the same day. Joy was younger than Marcus. Maybe 26, 27. She sat across from me in the lobby with her coat still on, like she didn't want to be in the building longer than necessary. Her answers were clipped. Maintenance. 6. Building condition. 6. Neighbor relations. Fine. Reason for moving. Personal. I marked it down. Then, because of something in her posture, an impatience that felt like it was covering something else, I asked if there was anything else she wanted to note. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, Does that apartment have mold? I told her the last inspection showed no mold, but that I could order a new one if she'd like. She shook her head. I just thought maybe mold, she said, because of the dreams. I felt something then, a small click of recognition. I kept my face neutral. What kind of dreams? I asked. The same dream, every night, for like 3 weeks straight before I decided to leave. I thought it was stress at first, but it was always the same. I asked her what the dream was about. She pressed her lips together. I was in the apartment, but it was bigger. Like there was a hallway that isn't really there. Going back behind the bedroom wall, and there was a door at the end. And I could hear something behind it. Like water, but not moving. Like a pool or a tank or something. And I'd walk toward it. I didn't want to, but I did every time, and then I'd touch the handle and wake up. She said it quickly, like she wanted it out of her mouth. Did you open the door? I asked. I don't know why I asked that. No, she said. I always woke up when I touched it. I wrote her comments down. I kept my handwriting steady. I thanked her and told her I'd flagged the unit for an environmental inspection, which I did. I submitted a request for air quality testing the next day. The results came back normal. No mold, no elevated CO levels, no unusual particulates. Everything within acceptable range. I pulled Marcus Uribe's exit interview form from the file that evening. I read his additional comments section. Then I read Joy Kessler's. I put them side by side on my desk. The same dream. The same details. An extra hallway. A door. Still water behind it. The compulsion to approach. Waking at the moment of contact with the handle. 2 people months apart, who had never met each other, describing the same dream in the same apartment. I want to tell you my first thought, because I think it's important for understanding how I processed this. My first thought was, carbon monoxide. I know that CO exposure can cause vivid dreams, hallucinations, confusion. It's a known phenomenon. People have reported shared experiences in buildings with leaks, not because of anything supernatural, but because the same toxin is producing the same neurological effects in different brains. It's documented. But the air quality test came back clean. No no gas leaks, nothing. My second thought was, coincidence. 2 people had bad dreams in the same apartment. Dreams about doors and hallways aren't unusual. They're common dream symbols. Maybe it wasn't as similar as it seemed. Maybe I was pattern matching where no pattern existed. I let it go. I moved on to other work. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have. It was a slow afternoon in December. I was filing old paperwork, clearing out folders from before my time, and I found myself looking through the exit interview history for Unit 4C. Kellner kept everything. Every form going back to 1993. They were organized by building, then by unit, in filing cabinets in the basement office. I pulled the 4C folder. It was thin. Turnover in that unit wasn't frequent. I counted 7 tenants in total since 1993. The earlier forms were handwritten, brief. No additional comments on most of them. But I looked at each one anyway. Tenant name, Robert Ashland. Duration of tenancy, 2 years, 3 months. Reason for moving, personal. Additional comment section in what I recognized as Denise's handwriting. Tenant mentioned recurring sleep disturbance. Recommended he consult physician. My chest tightened. That was all it said. No details about the dream. Just recurring sleep disturbance. I sat there for a long time, looking at that line in Denise's careful handwriting. Then I went through the rest of the forms. The tenants before Robert Ashland, 2009, 2005, 2001, 1997, 1993, had no additional comments. Blank sections or brief notes about parking or maintenance. So, 3 tenants. Robert Ashland in 2014, Marcus Uribe in 2024, Joy Kessler in 2024. Had all reported something related to dreams or sleep in Unit 4C. 3 out of 7 total tenants in 30 years. Or 3 out of the 4 most recent tenants. Because the tenant between Ashland and Uribe, a man named David Polk, who lived there from 2015 to 2023, had no additional comments on his exit form at all. 8 years in that apartment, and nothing. I told myself this was a coincidence. 3 reports over 10 years, 2 of which were detailed, and 1 of which was vague. Not significant. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. I considered talking to Denise about the 2014 form, asking if she remembered Robert Ashland, if he'd said more than what she wrote down. Why Al? Why 16? Why 16? Why 16? Then for nows and wit, that. Something stopped me. Maybe I was embarrassed. Maybe I didn't want to sound like the kind of person who believes apartments can make people have dreams. Well, why? Maybe, Why ack? Maybe I was afraid she'd remember more than I was ready to hear. But something stopped me. Instead, I did something else. I looked up David Polk's contact information. Bye. He'd moved out in January 2023, before my time at Kellner. That, one quote, that be. His forwarding address was on file standard procedure for deposit returns and final correspondence. Well, why retainin'. He was still in the city, just a few neighborhoods over. I told myself I was being thorough. Why? Myself, I'm Why? I told myself this was quality assurance follow-up, checking on a potential recurring environmental issue that might affect future tenants. Affect future tenants. That's died the 10. My tane. But something stopped me. I even half believed it. I wrote David Polk a letter. I wrote Kai. But something stopped me. Kept it professional. Identified myself as the current property manager, said we were conducting a follow-up review of tenant experiences in certain units, asked if he'd be willing to answer a few questions about his time at 4120 Garber, Unit 4C. I included my office number and email. He called me 4 days later. But something stopped me. His voice was ordinary. But something stopped me. Pleasant. He said he'd gotten my letter and was happy to help. I asked him the standard questions: first maintenance, building condition, neighbor relations. But something stopped me. He answered easily. But something stopped me. Everything had been fine. But something stopped me. He'd liked the apartment. Good light, quiet neighbors, reasonable rent. Then I asked why he'd moved out. My girlfriend and I bought a place, he said. Townhouse over in Birchwood. Made more sense financially. But something stopped me. I said that made sense. Something stopped me. Then I paused. I was trying to figure out how to phrase what I wanted to ask without sounding insane. During your time in the unit, I said, did you experience any unusual sleep disturbances, vivid dreams, recurring imagery, anything like that? But something stopped me. Silence on the line. Not a long silence, maybe 3 seconds. But enough that I noticed it. Why do you ask? He said. We've had a couple of tenants mention sleep issues, I said. We're investigating whether there might be an environmental cause. Air quality, noise frequency, that kind of thing. Wid. And once why. That. Wad and you, Well, Asaved. Or... that. Ka. And I do done wise. And... with... Something stopped me. More silence. Then he said, "Yeah, I had the dream." Something stopped me. Something in my stomach dropped. "Can you tell me about it?" But something stopped me. "It's hard to explain," he said. "It was like I was in the apartment, but it was different. Bigger. There was a hallway that went back further than it should, past where the bedroom wall is. And at the end there was this door, heavy-looking, and I could hear something behind it like water. Not running, just sitting there. Deep water, sitting still. But something stopped me. I didn't say anything. And I'd walk toward it. I'd try not to, but I always did. And I'd reach out for the handle, and then I'd wake up. How long did you have this dream?" But something stopped me. "Off and on the whole time I lived there," he said. 8 years. It wasn't every night. Sometimes I'd go weeks without it. But it always came back. "Did you ever open the door?" But something stopped me. I asked. The question came out before I could think about it. "Why, Ral? Why, Zach? Why, I yak? Why, I yak? Why, Zach? Why, you..." The same question I'd asked Joy Kessler. Kessler. David Polk didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice had changed. But something stopped me. Not dramatically. But something stopped me. Just slightly flatter. Something stopped me. Slightly more careful. But something stopped me. Something stopped me. I never opened it. Then he said, "Is that everything you need?" But something stopped me. I thanked him for his time. Something stopped me. I sat at my desk for a long time after that. Inwin. Why casta sin? Why sin? Why lad sin? Why lad sinned? Sin. Then sedden when. The office was quiet. Denise had left early that day. I could hear the radiator clicking and the muffled sound of traffic from Garber Street. But something stopped me. Normal sounds. The sounds of a building doing what buildings do. But something stopped me. 4 reports of the same dream. The same impossible hallway, the same door, the same still water, the same compulsion, the same waking at the threshold. David Polk had it for 8 years. But something stopped me. 8 years of walking toward a door in his sleep and never opening it. I pulled up the floor plan for 4C. One eye. All C, pass, blid. Blid, blid. It was a standard 1-bedroom entrance into the living area, kitchen along the left wall, bedroom through a doorway on the right, bathroom off the bedroom. And .r dat. .r dash, bathroom off the bedroom. 10 dash. Behind the bedroom's back wall was Unit 4D. Well, why? Behind 4D's back wall was the building's eastern exterior. Why's? Why ask cool? Why's cool? Why? Said Effere. Des. There was no space for an additional hallway. Physically, architecturally, there was nowhere for it to go. I had the building's original blueprints on file. Kellner kept those too, in a separate cabinet. Something stopped me. I pulled them. The plans confirmed what I already knew. 4C's bedroom wall was shared with 4D. But something stopped me. Standard framing. No interstitial space beyond what you'd expect. Insulation, wiring, pipes. Wiring. Pipes say, miring, my. Something stopped me. Nothing resembling a corridor. Something stopped me. Nothing resembling a door. I told myself, This was the end of it. The dream was a shared experience produced by some environmental factor the air quality test hadn't caught. Infrasound, maybe. Low-frequency vibrations from the building's mechanical systems. I'd read that infrasound can produce feelings of unease, even visual disturbances. Maybe it could produce recurring dream imagery too. Maybe the building's heating system, or something in the foundation, was generating a frequency that affected sleep architecture in the occupants of that specific unit. It was far-fetched, but it was possible. It was a physical explanation. I should have left it there. I wish I had left it there. But in January, something happened that I still can't explain, and it's the reason I'm telling you any of this. Unit 4C was vacant. It had been vacant since Joy Kessler moved out in November. We'd done the turnover, painted, cleaned, replaced the shower hardware. It was listed and showing, but we hadn't placed a new tenant yet. January is slow for leasing. People don't move in January if they can help it. And Kring, we... On January 14th, I was at 4120 Garber for a routine inspection of the common areas. Hallway lighting, stairwell condition, fire extinguisher dates, that sort of thing. I worked my way up from the lobby. My praps. My kenna. My kennive. My caps. My caps. I did the first floor, then the second. On the third floor, I noticed the hallway light nearest the stairwell was flickering. I made a note. I checked the fire extinguisher. Then I continued up to... the fourth floor. The fourth floor hallway was dim. Dim. 2 of the 4 overhead fixtures were out. I made a note of that too. I walked the length of the hall, checking doors for any visible issues, peeling paint, damaged hardware. 4A? Fine. 4B? 4C. I stopped in front of 4C. The door was closed, as it should have been. What? The unit was vacant and locked. I had the master key on my ring. There was no reason for me to go inside. Maya. I'd already done the turnover inspection in November. But I was standing there, and the hallway was dim, and the building was very quiet. I put the key in the lock and opened the door. The apartment was empty. Clean. The paint on the walls was fresh, that slightly flat, untouched white that new paint has before anyone lives with it. The floors were bare. The kitchen was to my left. The bedroom doorway was to my right. Gray January light came through the living room windows. Everything was exactly as it should have been. I walked through the living room. Why? Why-ass? Why? Why-ass? I looked at the kitchen, empty counters, empty cabinets, the faint chemical smell of cleaning product. I walked to the bedroom doorway and looked in. Empty room. Closet doors open, nothing inside. The window looked out onto the air shaft. I stood in the bedroom and looked at the back wall. I stood in the bedroom and looked at the back wall. It was just a wall. Flat, white. I could hear the radiator ticking. I could hear a faint hum from somewhere the building's systems. running as they always did. There was nothing wrong with the wall. There was nothing wrong with the room. There was nothing wrong with the apartment. But I noticed something. My hand was shaking, not dramatically. Just a fine tremor in my fingers. The kind you get when you've had too much coffee or when you're very cold. But I hadn't had coffee that morning, and the apartment was warm, the heat was on, even with the unit vacant, to prevent pipe freezing. I was warm, and my hand was shaking. I locked the door behind me. I finished my inspection of the 4th floor, then the 5th, then the 6th. Everything was normal. I drove back to the office and filed my report. I noted the burned-out hallway lights and the flickering fixture. Standard maintenance items. I did not note anything about Unit 4C. Why, that night I had a dream. I want to be careful about how I describe this, because I know how it sounds. I know what you're thinking. I know the obvious conclusion that I'd been thinking about the dream so much that my own subconscious produced a version of it. But one produced. That's called priming. It's well documented. When you spend time thinking about something, especially something with emotional weight, your brain is more likely to incorporate it into dream imagery. That's all this was. In the dream, I was in an apartment. It wasn't my apartment. It was a white room, empty, with bare floors and fresh paint. I was standing in a bedroom, and behind me, not in front of me, behind me, there was a doorway that I knew wasn't supposed to be there. I didn't turn around. I could feel it. The way you can feel someone standing behind you in a room even when you haven't looked. A spatial awareness. An architectural presence that shouldn't have existed. And I could hear water. Very faint, very still. Not dripping, not flowing. Just the sound that still water makes when there's a lot of it. That almost subaudible density. Like the air in the room was heavier in one direction. I didn't turn around. I woke up. It was 3:40 in the morning. I was in my own bed, in my own apartment, 12 blocks from 4120 Garber. My sheets were damp with sweat. My heart rate was elevated. But I was fine. It was a dream. I'd primed myself. I went back to sleep. I didn't dream again that night. The next morning, I told myself it was nothing. And the morning after that, when it happened again, I told myself the same thing. And the morning after that. It wasn't identical each time. Some nights I was in the empty apartment. Some nights I was in a hallway that went on too long. Some nights I was just in a room, any room, and I could hear the water. But it was always behind me, always in a direction I didn't turn to face. And I always woke before anything else happened. I told myself it was anxiety. I told myself it was because I'd been fixating on the tenant reports, and my brain was processing that fixation during sleep. I started listening to podcasts before bed. I tried melatonin. I kept a sleep log documenting each occurrence. The responsible thing. The rational thing. After 2 weeks, I went to see my doctor. I told her I was having recurring dreams and disrupted sleep. She asked about stress, caffeine, alcohol, screen time. I answered honestly. She suggested improving my sleep hygiene, possibly trying a short course of a sleep aid if it continued. She did not ask what the dreams were about. I did not volunteer the information. The sleep aid helped. On the nights I took it, I slept heavily and didn't remember dreaming. But I didn't want to take it every night. And on the nights I didn't take it, the dream was there, waiting, patient, as if it had been happening the whole time, and I just couldn't remember it when the medication was in my system. In February, I did something I'd been putting off. I went to talk to Denise. I framed it carefully. I told her I'd noticed multiple tenants in Unit 4C reporting sleep disturbances, and I wanted to know if she recalled anything from her time managing the building. I mentioned Robert Ashland's 2014 exit form, the one she'd written. Denise looked at me for a moment. She was eating lunch at her desk. A container of leftover pasta that she ate cold, which she did every day. She set her fork down. "The dream apartment," she said. I felt cold. "What?" I said. "That's what Gerald calls it," she said. "The Super 4C. He says tenants used to complain about nightmares." She shrugged. "Old building, weird pipes, maybe a draft. I noted it for Ashland because he brought it up, but there was nothing actionable. The unit passes every inspection." "Does Gerald know anything else about it?" I asked. "You'd have to ask him," she said. "I never pushed it. It's a building quirk. Every building has them. 2B has a cold spot in the hallway outside it. 6A's kitchen faucet runs warm for exactly 3 seconds before going cold, then warms up again. Old buildings are weird." She picked up her fork and went back to her pasta. The conversation was over as far as she was concerned. That afternoon, I texted Gerald. I asked if he was available to talk about Unit 4C. He responded 20 minutes later. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., I'll be in the basement." The basement of 4120 Garber was half storage, half mechanical. The boiler, the electrical panels, the water heater, the circuit boxes. Exposed pipes, low ceilings, fluorescent lights with that faint greenish cast. Gerald was down there when I arrived, doing something with a wrench near the water heater. He was a large man, mid-50s, with heavy arms and a face that rarely changed expression. 4C, he said when he saw me. Not a question. "Yeah," I said. "Denise said you might know something about it." He finished what he was doing with the wrench, set it down on a workbench, wiped his hands on a rag. Then he leaned against the bench and looked at me. "What do you want to know?" he said. "Tenants have reported recurring dreams," I said. "Multiple tenants, over multiple years. I'm trying to figure out if there's a cause. Environmental, structural, anything." Gerald nodded slowly. "How many tenants talked to you about it?" "3 directly. 1 through an old form. 4, he said. He seemed to consider something. "In my time, I've had maybe 6 or 7 mention it to me. Going back to when I started, not all of them were in exit interviews. Some just mentioned it in passing, asked if the building was noisy at night, that kind of thing. 6 or 7. In 13 years, and they all described the same dream," I said. "More or less, a hallway that isn't there, a door, water behind it." He said this like he was describing a leaky faucet. Matter of fact, untroubled. "Doesn't that concern you?" I asked. He looked at me steadily. "No," he said, "because it's just a dream. People dream about their apartments. They spend 8 hours a night in them. Their brains map the space and then do weird things with it while they sleep. You put different people in the same physical space. Their brains are mapping the same geometry. It's not strange that they produce similar imagery. It was a rational explanation. A very rational explanation. And I wanted to believe it. I almost did believe it. Gerald's calmness was reassuring. He'd been in the building for 13 years. He was the closest person to the situation, and he wasn't afraid. That had to mean something. "Have you ever slept in 4C? I asked. Something changed in his face. Not dramatically. His eyes moved, a quick lateral flick there and back. Then he said, "No. I live in the basement unit. I have no reason to sleep in 4C. "Right," I said. "Of course. Is there anything else?" he said. I told him no. I thanked him. I walked back up through the stairwell to the lobby and out into the cold. The conversation should have reassured me. In many ways it did. Gerald was right. The brain mapped space, and similar spaces might produce similar dream architecture. It was logical, but there was that moment, that flick of his eyes, that pause before he answered. It could have been nothing. It could have been irritation at an odd question, but it stayed with me. The dreams continued. 3 or 4 times a week now. Always the same core elements. The white space, the direction I wouldn't turn, the still water, the sense of something patient and waiting and vast. I started sleeping poorly even on the nights without the dream, anticipating it, lying in bed listening to the silence of my own apartment and thinking about 4C 12 blocks away, empty in the dark, the fresh white paint on its walls, the radiator ticking, the bedroom, the back wall. What was behind the back wall? Unit patrude. That's what was behind the back wall. I knew this. I had the blueprints. In early March, I did something impulsive. A tenant in 4D, a woman named Carolyn Watts, who'd lived there for 5 years, submitted a maintenance request for a slow-draining sink. Normal request. I signed it to Gerald. But then I also scheduled a routine inspection of 4D for the following week, which I would conduct myself. I had no legitimate reason to inspect 4D. There was no complaint, no renewal, no flag. But I wanted to see the wall. Her side of the wall. The bedroom wall that she shared with 4C. The inspection was on a Tuesday afternoon. Carolyn let me in. She was polite, slightly confused about why an inspection was happening, but not bothered enough to question it. Her apartment was lived in and comfortable, books stacked on surfaces, a cat watching me from the couch, the smell of coffee. Her bedroom was at the back, on the left side of the unit. The mirror image of 4C's layout. I looked at her bedroom wall. The shared wall. She had a bookcase against it, mostly full of paperbacks. A calendar hung above the bookcase. The wall was painted a soft blue. It was just a wall. "Everything look okay?" she asked from the doorway. "Yes," I said. "Perfectly fine. Standard check." I left. I filed a brief inspection report. No issues noted. That night, I didn't dream about the apartment. I dreamed about the wall. Just the wall. White on one side, blue on the other. And in the dream, the wall was thin. Paper thin. And I could hear the water through it. I need to tell you about what happened on March 19th. This is the part I keep coming back to. The part that made me start writing all of this down. I was in the office, late afternoon. Denise had gone home. I was finishing paperwork. My phone rang. It was the general inquiry line for 4120 Garber. I answered. "Hi," said a woman's voice. "I'm calling about a unit I saw listed. 4C, I wanted to schedule a viewing." Her name was Megan Hale. She was looking for a 1-bedroom in the neighborhood, and 4C fit her price range. I scheduled her for a showing the next day. That night, I lay in bed and I thought, I should tell her. About the dreams. About the tenants. About the pattern. But tell her what, exactly? That multiple previous tenants had reported similar dreams? That wasn't a material defect. It wasn't mold, it wasn't structural damage, it wasn't a history of violent crime. There's no legal obligation to disclose that previous tenants had weird dreams. There's no box on the lease for that. It's not a thing. It's not real. It's not real because dreams aren't real. I showed her the apartment the next day. She loved it. She said it had great light. She said the bedroom was a good size. She stood in the bedroom and looked at the back wall and said, "I could put my desk here." I processed her application. She passed the background check, the credit check, the income verification. Her references were good. Her previous landlord said she'd been a great tenant. There was no reason to deny her. No legitimate reason. I approved the application. She signed the lease on March 28th with a move-in date of April 1st. I felt sick. But what was the alternative? I couldn't refuse to lease a unit because of dreams. I couldn't tell my supervisor that I thought the apartment was... What? Haunted? That word didn't fit. Nothing was happening in 4C. It passed every inspection. No one had ever been harmed there. People just had dreams, and then they moved out, and they were fine afterward. Marcus Uraby was fine. Joy Kessler was fine. David Polk lived there for 8 years and was fine. They were fine, but they all left. Megan Hale moved in on April 1st. I didn't hear from her for the first 2 weeks. Normal. Tenants don't usually contact management unless something's wrong. Silence is good. Silence means everything's working. On April 16th, she submitted a maintenance request. Bedroom wall, intermittent noise, possibly pipe-related. Occurs at night. Not loud, but persistent. I read the request 3 times. Then I assigned it to Gerald with a note. Please investigate source of noise in 4C bedroom, rear wall. Tenant reports nighttime occurrence. Gerald's response came the next day, via text. Check pipes and wall. No issues found. Advised tenant that old radiator systems can produce intermittent noise. Normal for building. I could have followed up. I could have gone to look myself. I didn't. I was afraid of what I would hear if I stood in that bedroom at night. That sentence. I need you to understand what it cost me to write it. I'm a property manager. I'm a practical person. I file forms and schedule inspections and return deposits. I am not someone who is afraid of apartments, but I was afraid. I was afraid in a way I couldn't articulate because the fear didn't have an object. There was nothing to be afraid of. An empty hallway in a dream. Still water behind a door. That's nothing. That's the brain doing what brains do. And yet, 3 weeks after that maintenance request, Megan Hale called me. Not the building line. My direct line. It was a Thursday evening, just after 6. I'd been about to leave the office. Hi, she said. This is Megan from 4C. I have a kind of weird question. Sure, I said. Do you know who lived here before me? I can't share previous tenant information, I said. Standard response. Okay, she said. That's fine. Have you ever gotten complaints about that unit before? About dreams? I closed my eyes. What kind of dreams? I said. She laughed. A short, nervous laugh. See... The fact that you asked what kind instead of what do you mean is kind of freaking me out. I didn't say anything. I've been having this dream, she said. Every night for the last week, I'm in the apartment, but there's an extra hallway going back behind my bedroom, and there's a door, and I can hear water behind it, and I walk toward it even though I don't want to, and I wake up when I touch the handle. I sat there with the phone pressed to my ear. The office was empty. The parking lot outside was gray in the fading light. Has anyone else reported this? She said. I should have said no. I should have said it sounded like stress-related sleep disturbance. I should have recommended she see a doctor. I should have been professional and dismissive and moved on. Instead, I said, yes. The silence lasted a long time. How many? She said. Several. Over multiple years. Several. Her voice was flat. And the apartment is still being rented? The unit passes every inspection, I said. Air quality, structural, environmental, there's nothing physically wrong with it. Then what is it? She said. I said I didn't know. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'm not moving out over a dream. I just signed a lease. I can't afford to break it. I told her I understood. I told her if she changed her mind, I would waive the early termination fee. I don't know if I had the authority to make that offer. I made it anyway. I'm going to try sleeping in the living room, she said. See if that changes anything. I told her to let me know. We hung up. That night, I had the worst dream yet. I was in 4C, not my own apartment, but 4C specifically. I recognized the layout, the light, the windows, and the hallway was there, behind me, as always. But this time I turned. I turned around. The hallway was long, much longer than it should have been. The walls were white, the floor was bare wood, and the light was gray and even no visible source. It went back 30 feet, maybe 40, and at the end was the door. Dark wood, heavy, a brass handle, old-looking, and the water. I could hear it clearly now. A vast stillness on the other side, the sound of depth, of volume, of something being held in place. I walked toward it, my feet on the bare wood, my hand shaking as it had shaken in the real apartment in January, the door getting closer, the sound of the water getting fuller. I reached the door. I put my hand on the handle, brass, cold, and I heard something new, something that hadn't been in any of the other tenants' descriptions. A sound from beyond the door that wasn't just water. It was breathing, slow, deep, patient. Something on the other side of the door was breathing, and the breath was moving the water slightly, barely, a vast chest rising and settling. I woke up. Patabondoispezacham. My bedroom. My apartment. My hands pressed flat against the mattress, both of them shaking now. Sweat on my face, on my chest, heart hammering. I didn't go back to sleep. I got up, turned on every light in my apartment, made coffee, and sat at my kitchen table until morning. I could still hear it, the breathing, the water. Not really, not actually. But the memory of the sound was so clear, so dimensional, that my ears kept reaching for it in the silence. I called in sick the next day. I stayed home. I didn't sleep. I watched television I didn't process. I ate food I didn't taste. I existed in my apartment, which was 12 blocks from 4120 Garber, and I waited for the feeling to pass. It didn't pass. On Saturday, 2 days after the dream, I drove to the building. I don't know why. I told myself I was checking on the flickering hallway light I'd reported in January. I told myself it was a routine visit. But it was a Saturday, and I don't work Saturdays, and I didn't tell anyone I was going. I parked on Garber Street. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, looking at the building. Brick, 6 stories. Windows reflecting the gray sky. Nothing remarkable about it. A building like 100 other buildings in this neighborhood. People lived their lives in it. People went to work and came home and cooked dinner and slept and woke up and left again. That's what buildings are for. I went inside. The lobby was empty. The green tile floor. The mailboxes. The radiator smell. I took the stairs up. First floor. Second. Third. Fourth. The hallway lights on 4 had been replaced. Both fixtures were working now. The hallway was bright. I walked to 4C and stood in front of the door. I could hear nothing from inside. The unit was quiet. I raised my hand to knock, to check on Megan, and then stopped, because I realized I could hear something, very faint, from behind the door. Water. Not rushing, not dripping. Just there. The way you can hear the ocean in a shell, a whisper of depth, of volume. I stood there with my hand raised and listened. It was the pipes. It had to be the pipes. Old building, cast iron plumbing, water moving through the system from other units. Toilets flushing, showers running, sinks filling. The sound carries through the walls. That's all it was. That's all it was. I lowered my hand. I didn't knock. I walked back down the stairs and out to my car and drove home. Megan Hale called me on Monday. She said sleeping in the living room didn't help. She said the dream followed her. She said it was getting longer. She was getting closer to the door now, spending more time in the hallway. and the sound of the water was louder. She asked me again what was wrong with the apartment. I told her I didn't know. I told her the offer to waive the termination fee still stood. She said she'd think about it. She said it was just a dream. She said she wasn't going to let a dream drive her out of her home. I understood. I respected it. But something in her voice, a tightness, a tiredness, told me she wasn't sleeping well even on the nights she didn't remember the dream. I filed a formal request for a comprehensive environmental assessment of Unit 4C, full spectrum, air quality, electromagnetic fields, acoustic analysis, structural integrity review. Denise approved it without comment. She was used to my thoroughness by then and didn't question it. The assessment took place the first week of May. A team of 2 technicians spent an entire day in the unit. Megan stayed with a friend while they worked. They tested everything. They measured everything. They recorded ambient sound levels at multiple times of day and night. They checked the walls, the floor, the ceiling. They checked the building's HVAC system, the boiler output, the electrical systems. The report came back clean, completely clean. Every measurement within normal range. No anomalous frequencies. No unusual electromagnetic fields. No structural irregularities. No water infiltration, no hidden moisture, no mold growth, no pest activity. The unit was, according to every metric available to modern building science, perfectly normal. I read the report at my desk and I felt something close to despair, because I wanted them to find something. I wanted there to be a gas leak, a hidden mold colony, a frequency generator in the walls. I wanted a cause. A cause would mean a solution. A cause would mean I could fix it, or at least explain it, or at the very least point to it and say, this is what's wrong. This is why people have dreams in that apartment. This is why I have dreams about that apartment, even though I've never slept there. This is why. This is why. But there was no why. There was just the dream, recurring across tenants in years, identical in its architecture, resistant to inspection, resistant to explanation. A hallway, a door, water, something breathing. And here's the thing I haven't told you yet. The thing I've been circling around. 2 nights after the environmental report came back, I had the dream again. And this time, I opened the door. I shouldn't have been able to. Every tenant. Marcus, Joy, David, Megan. They all said the same thing. They woke up when they touched the handle. That was the boundary. That was where the dream ended. Touch the handle. Wake up. Every time. But I opened it. The door swung inward, heavy and slow, and behind it there was... I need to say this carefully. Behind it there was a space. That's the most accurate word. S-space. Dark, but not completely dark. The gray light from the hallway reached a few feet past the threshold, and then it stopped. Not faded. Stopped. As if the light was aware of a boundary. And beyond that boundary, there was water. Still. Black. A surface extending in every direction. Farther than I could see. A pool or a lake or an ocean, I couldn't tell because there were no walls, no far shore, no horizon. Just the water, flat and black and still. And at the edge of the water, just barely within the gray light, there was something. A shape, large. Still, I couldn't make out what it was. Whether it was in the water or above it or part of it. It was dark, and it was vast, and it was breathing. The water moved with its breath. Tiny waves, barely visible, radiating outward from the shape and reaching my feet at the threshold. I stood there, and I looked at it. And I understood, with a sudden total certainty that only exists in dreams, that it was looking back at me. That it had always been looking back at me. That it had been waiting behind every door and every dream and every tenant's sleep for years. Patient, still, breathing. And then it moved. I woke up screaming. Actually screaming, which I have never done in my adult life. My throat was raw with it. My neighbors must have heard. My body was rigid, every muscle clenched. I was on the floor next to my bed. I'd fallen out or thrown myself out. The sheets were tangled around my legs. I lay there on the floor in the dark, breathing, shaking, waiting for my heart to slow. And I listened. I listened to my apartment, to the silence, to the walls, the pipes, the spaces between things. I couldn't hear the water. I couldn't hear the water. That's what I kept telling myself. I couldn't hear the water. I was in my apartment. I was awake. The dream was over. I was fine. The next morning, I put in a transfer request. I asked to be reassigned to a different portfolio. Any portfolio that didn't include 4120 Garber. I cited personal reasons. Denise was surprised but didn't push it. The transfer took 2 weeks to process. During those 2 weeks, I didn't go to the building. I didn't check on Megan. I didn't check on anything. I did my other work, the other 6 buildings in my portfolio, and I waited. Megan Hale gave notice on May 30th. 6 weeks after moving in, I saw the paperwork come through before my transfer was finalized. Reason for moving: personal. I didn't conduct her exit interview. My replacement would handle that. The dreams slowed after the transfer. By June, I was having them once a week instead of every night. By July, once or twice a month. By September, hardly at all. When they did come, they were muted. The hallway was shorter, the door farther away, the water quieter, as if distance mattered, as if 12 blocks hadn't been enough, but being removed from the administrative connection to the building, from the paperwork, the keys, the knowledge, created some additional separation. I don't have the dreams anymore. Not regularly. Maybe once every few months, I'll wake with the afterimage of a long white hallway, the sense memory of still water, but it fades quickly. It doesn't stay with me the way it used to. What stays with me is something else. 2 weeks ago, I was at my desk. New portfolio, new buildings, all of them fine, all of them boring in the best possible way, and I received a message from a colleague, a woman named Rachel who'd taken over 4120 Garber after me. The message was short, professional. Hey! Weird question. Do you still have contact info for any former tenants of 4C at 4120 Garber? I'm doing some follow-up on recurring tenant feedback, and I'd like to check a few things. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "What kind of feedback?" Her response came an hour later. Sleep complaints. Multiple tenants mentioning the same thing. I've ordered an environmental assessment, but I wanted to check if this was flagged before. I sent her the contact information she asked for. I sent her a link to the environmental report from May. I did not tell her what the dreams were about. I did not tell her about my own experience. I did not tell her anything beyond what the files would show. But I wonder now. I wonder whether she'll start having the dream too. Whether it's the apartment or the knowledge of the apartment. Whether it's the walls or the awareness of what's behind them. Whether it passes from tenant to tenant through sleep or from manager to manager through paperwork. I wonder about Gerald. 13 years in that building. 6 or 7 tenants mentioning the dream to him. And that moment when I asked if he'd slept in 4C, and his eyes moved. I wonder about Denise. 15 years. The dream apartment, she'd said. So casual, so unconcerned. How long had she known? What did she know that she hadn't told me? I wonder about David Polk. 8 years in that apartment. 8 years of the dream. Walking toward the door every night for 8 years and never opening it. I opened it. I don't know what that means. I don't know if it matters. I don't know if anything I experienced was real in any meaningful sense, or if it was all just my brain mapping a space and doing weird things with it while I slept, the way Gerald said. Maybe he's right. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe old buildings produce old dreams, and similar spaces produce similar architecture in the sleeping mind, and there's no hallway, and no door, and no water, and nothing breathing in the dark. But here's what I keep coming back to. Here's the thing I can't explain away. After I opened the door in the dream, after I saw what was behind it, after I woke up screaming on my floor, I got up the next morning and I went to my bathroom to wash my face, and I looked down at my feet. They were wet, not damp. Wet. From the ankles down, as if I'd been standing in water. The bath mat was dry. The floor was dry. My feet were wet and cold, and there was a fine grit on my skin, like sediment, like the bottom of something deep and still. I dried my feet. I didn't tell anyone. I don't know what I would have said. The water dried. The grit rinsed away. My feet were fine. But every night since then, every single night, before I get into bed, I check. I check that my feet are dry. I check that the floor is dry. I check that there's nothing under the bed, nothing in the closet, nothing in the walls. I check every corner of my apartment like a child checking for monsters. And every night, so far, everything is dry. Everything is normal. Everything is fine. But last week, I woke at 3:40 in the morning. That same time, always that same time. And the apartment was silent. And I was fine, and I hadn't been dreaming. And I lay there in the dark, listening. And I heard it. Water. Very faint. Very still. Coming from the wall behind my bed. I haven't checked. I'm afraid to check. I don't want to know if it's the pipes. I don't want to know if it's not. I live 12 blocks from 4120 Garber. I haven't been inside that building in 7 months. I don't manage it anymore. I don't have the keys. But lately, when I'm falling asleep, in that space between waking and dreaming, I feel it. The way you feel a doorway behind you in the dark, a spatial certainty, an architectural presence, as if the hallway is getting longer, as if it doesn't need the apartment anymore, as if it never did,